Hello my dear students, welcome back to the channels and thank you very much for encouragements and thank you very much that you people are watching the lectures and you are getting benefit. Today we are going to discuss another important topic, that is interaction of organisms with each other and with their environment. This topic is helping the students who are taking their exams through Cambridge, either GCE O levels or IGCSE. But this lecture will also help the students who are taking their exams through GCSE, either through Edexcel, AQA or OCR. This unit or this concept is a pretty large concept. So this will be dealt in two segments. So today we are going to discuss the first segment of this lecture, and in this unit today we will be discussing about ecology, that is the interaction of organisms with each other and with their environment. We will discuss about components of the environment and how these components are important to each other, and in this segment we will also discuss that how different living organisms in an ecosystem or in an environment, they are dependent on each other, and particularly on the basis of their nutrition or on the basis of their feeding resources. So let's begin with this topic today. So as we discussed that this is interaction of organisms with each other and with their environment. So this is one word summarized as ecology. Now the important concept here is environment. What is an environment? That if we are going to study a living organism, so everything that is found around that living organism is making up its environment, or you can say is a component of its environment. Like if I am sitting in the room, so everything in my room is making up my environment, like fan, air conditioner, light, table, books, laptop, pens. So all these components are making my environment. Let's consider a lion wandering in a grassland. So in the grassland, the plants, grasses, trees around that lion, herbivores like zebras, reindeers, cows, buffaloes, or other carnivores like foxes, like jackals, like cheetah, jaguar, like birds. So they are all making up the environment of that lion. And if any of the components of the environment is fluctuating, so it will affect the normal life activity of that lion. Like if the food is not available, means there are less number of zebras, reindeers, cows, buffaloes, so it would become hard for the lion to survive. When we talk about environment, so environment is comprising of two components. One component is abiotic environment, means this component is comprising of non-living objects, non-living factors in the environment. So abiotic environment includes all those factors, whether they have physical existence or non-physical existence, but they do not have living approach, so they are considered as abiotic component of the environment, like light, air, water, minerals, soil, rocks. These are abiotic components of the environment, or they can be taken as abiotic environment. The second component of the environment is biotic environment, or biotic components of the environment. Biotic environment comprises of living organisms that are present in that area. So first of all, we must discuss about abiotic environment and why different components of abiotic environment are important to life. As I told you earlier, the different components of abiotic environment include light, temperature, air, water, minerals, and many more. Let's see how they are important to life. For example, when we talk about light, so light is important for plants because they carry photosynthesis, and the light is source of energy for photosynthesis in plants. But light is also important for animals because with the help of light, animals are able to see around, to look around, they can search for their food, and they can search for their shelter places where they can hide, where they can live. When we talk about air, so air is a mixture of gases. Carbon dioxide is a component gas of air that is needed by plants essentially for the process of photosynthesis. And oxygen, that is making 21% of the air, is essentially required for respiration. Similarly, when we talk about water, so all the living organisms with their cells, they are 70% water by means of mass. I repeat that all the living organisms, they have 70% water by means of mass in their cells. This water is important to life. Water is an essential raw material for the process of photosynthesis. Water is serving as transport medium in plants, like xylem is transporting water, and within water in the dissolved state minerals are transported to the leaves. Similarly, food prepared in the leaves is transported to the different parts of the plant body while dissolved in water. Whereas in animals, if we consider about ourselves, so blood that is running through the blood vessels and transporting substances from one part of the body to the other part of the body, that is also blessed by water. Water is the transport medium in the blood circulatory system in mammals. Water is needed for hydrolysis. So there are number of requirements of water. When we talk about minerals, minerals are important. For example, magnesium is essentially required for making chlorophyll. Similarly, calcium is essentially required for healthy bones and teeth in animals. Similarly, if we think about iron, it is important component of hemoglobin and is needed for making red blood cells. When we talk about temperature, seasonal temperatures are required for germinating seeds and particularly for the food crops. Similarly, seasonal temperatures are required for ensuring flowering and fruiting in plants. If those temperatures are not met, so these processes may not occur in plants. So abiotic components are essentially required to maintain the life activities on this planet. When we talk about biotic environment, so as I told you earlier, biotic environment comprises of living organisms, and these living organisms can be discussed in terms of species, in terms of population, and in terms of community. Species, organisms that look alike, they possess the similar features, and they can interbreed to produce offsprings that are fertile, means they can interbreed to produce fertile offsprings like their own, like themselves. So they are said to be belonging to one species. So I repeat, species, organisms that look alike, possessing similar features, and they can interbreed together, they can reproduce together to raise fertile offsprings of their own type. So they are known to be of one species, they are known to be of the same species. Now, when we talk about population, so population refers to total number of individuals that belong to one species living all together in one area, living all together in one area. So I repeat, the total number of organisms of one species living all together in one area, they make up a population. And when we talk about community, so it means number of organisms that belong to different species or populations and all are living together in one area. So they collectively make up a community. I repeat my words. The total number of organisms that belong to different species or populations and all are living together in one area, so collectively they make up a community. When we talk about population, organisms that belong to same species, they are making up a population, and these organisms are competing each other for food and for reproductive mates. Why? Because they use or consume same type of food and they do possess same feeding mechanisms and feeding habits, and they have the same feeding parts. But they are dependent on each other for their reproduction. Means they reproduce with each other, but still they can find competition for their reproductive mates. But when we talk about members of a community that belong to different species, they are reproductively isolated. Means organisms of one species, they cannot reproduce with the organisms of another species. So means they are reproductively isolated with each other. But nutritionally, they are dependent on each other. In organisms belonging to one species may be a feeding source or a food source for an organism that is belonging to another species. So one organism of one species is a food and the other organism of another species is feeding on that. So this is what the community members do depend on. When we are talking about the environment, so environment can be categorized as ecosystem or habitat. An ecosystem is the part or component of the environment with the suitable environmental factors that can support the life of a particular organism. Means a particular organism can be found, can be studied in an ecosystem, because ecosystem has got environmental factors that are suitable, that are supportive for the survival of that particular organism. Like we have got different types of ecosystem: grassland ecosystem, desert ecosystem, we can have river ecosystem, we can have river Nile ecosystem, we can have river Indus ecosystem, we can have ocean ecosystem, we can have Mediterranean ecosystem. So different parts of the world, they can be recognized as ecosystem because they have particular environmental features that are supporting particular life forms in those areas. And when we talk about habitat, a habitat is a component or is a patch or is a part of an ecosystem with the most suitable environmental features that are supportive to the life of a particular living organism. It is an area within an ecosystem where an organism not only lives, it feeds and it reproduces successfully. It is a part of the ecosystem where feeding resources are abundantly available, shelter places are abundantly available, and predatory threats are least found. So here organisms not only live, but they can raise their population to ensure their racial survival in the upcoming generations, in the upcoming era. On the basis of nutrition, living organisms that are making up a community, they are classified into various categories that we are going to discuss now. First of all, producers. Producers are the living organisms that can make, that can synthesize their own energy rich compounds, their own energy rich organic molecules. With the help of inorganic components they collect from the environment, and the energy they collect from the environment. So these producers are able to generate their own energy rich compounds and then utilize them, and also make available for the other living organisms in the environment or in the ecosystem. And well-known example we have plants. Plants carry photosynthesis. They are taken as producers. Why? Because they collect carbon dioxide, they collect water, they collect minerals from the environment, and they make use of energy derived from the sunlight, and they make carbohydrates primarily, and they make different types of proteins and different types of fats. They utilize these molecules in their life processes themselves and make available for the animals too. So the plants are the producers. So we can have grass, trees, mango tree, oak tree. So these are all producers. They are producing food for them, and they are producing food in the form of organic molecules, and for this purpose they collect inorganic raw material and energy from the environment. The next category is consumers. Consumers are the organisms that collect prepared organic molecules from the environment and utilize them for their life processes. They do not build, they do not synthesize their own organic molecules, but they rely directly or indirectly on producers for their energy rich organic molecules. So animals are all consumers, and these consumers are further categorized on the basis of their source as primary consumer. If they are collecting their energy rich organic molecules directly from plants, if they are feeding on plants or they are feeding on the plant products, means they are feeding on producers, so they are taken as primary consumers. As they are feeding on plants or plant products, so they are also considered as herbivores. Herb is the word used for plants. We have got a number of examples like goat, like rabbits, like grasshopper, and many more examples like zebra, reindeers, cows, buffaloes. So these are herbivores, and these are actually primary consumers because their immediate food source is plant. When we talk about secondary consumers, so these are the organisms, these are the animals that feed on primary consumers. Like we can have sparrows are feeding on the grasshopper. So sparrow is the secondary consumer because grasshopper is the primary consumer. It's feeding on grass. So sparrow is the secondary consumer because it is feeding on the grasshopper. Similarly, snake feeding on the rabbit. So snake may be taken as a secondary consumer. Fox feeding on rabbits. So fox can be taken as secondary consumer. When we talk about tertiary consumer, so these are the animals that are feeding on secondary consumers. Like snake is feeding on sparrows, a snake is feeding on the sparrow eggs, so snake can be taken as tertiary consumer. When we talk about quaternary consumer, so these are the consumers, these are the animals that feed on tertiary consumers. Like tertiary consumers, we discussed earlier as snakes. So hawk can be taken, eagle can be taken as quaternary consumer because eagle is feeding on snakes. So all these consumers excluding primary consumers can be defined as herbivores, but secondary consumer, tertiary consumers and quaternary consumers, they can be defined as carnivores because they are feeding on the mass, on the flesh of other animals, so they are taken as carnivores. There is another category of animals that are having the properties of both primary consumers or carnivorous habits as well, like humans, crow, ants, etc. These are known as omnivores. Omnivores are the animals that can feed on plants or plant products, and they can also feed on animals, animal meat, animal flesh. So these are known as omnivores. And omnivores, as they have a wide variety of food available for them, so they have got more survival value. Then we have got another category. These are known as decomposers. And decomposers are actually microorganisms, including bacteria and fungi specifically. So these decomposers break down organic molecules in the environment, convert them into their inorganic components, and the energies released during this process, they make use of those energies and ensure their survival. But in this way, these organisms are also helping in recycling of the nutrients for life process continuing on this planet Earth. Because the inorganic components that have been used in the past in raising the organic molecules, now they have been restored by the activity of these decomposers, and they can be reused again to maintain the energy cycle. So these are known as decomposers. Now we have got certain relationships, like one relationship is predator-prey relationship. Predator is an animal that hunts, kills, and feeds on other animals. Like lion is a predator that is feeding on zebra or reindeer or cow after killing it. So these cows, zebras or reindeers are taken as prey because they are being killed and they are being fed by the lion, by the tigers or by a cheetah. So this type of relationship, feeding relationship that is found between carnivore and herbivore, are one type of consumer, like tertiary or secondary or quaternary consumer with the other. So this is known as predator-prey relationship. It's not always the case that a lion is feeding all time on the primary consumer. A lion may be feeding on secondary consumer as well, tertiary consumer as well. It depends what can turn out to be its food, but a lion won't be feeding on plants. Another relationship we have, parasite-host relationship. A parasite is a smaller organism who depends on a larger organism for its food, for its shelter. Larger organism is called a host and a smaller organism is called a parasite, like head louse, body louse that live on the body of the host. They are parasites, and the host may be humans, cows, buffaloes, so they are the hosts. A tick is feeding on the blood meal of a cow, so the tick is a parasite and the cow is a host. Mosquito is feeding on the blood meal of humans or other mammals, so mosquito is a parasite, mammals are the hosts. There are certain parasites that potentially, intentionally cause diseases in the body of the host. So these specific parasites are known as pathogens. These are known as pathogens. So pathogens are special parasites that intentionally induce diseases in their host, and this is what they do to ensure their survival, against the immune system of the host. Another consumer category, that is the carnivorous category, but it is taken as scavengers, and the habit is known as scavenging habit. Scavengers are the animals that feed on the flesh of dead animals. What is the difference between a scavenger and a predator? A predator kills and feeds on the prey. A predator kills and feeds on the other animals. Like a lion kills a fox and then feeds on it. But a scavenger does not normally kill the other animals by itself. Rather, it relies on the dead animals found in the environment. So you can see an animal that has already been killed. It is dead. It is found dead. So these scavengers gather around it and start feeding, like vultures, like hyenas, like ants. So these animals feed on the dead animals. Feeding relationship among the organisms that are present within a community, that is well illustrated by a food chain. A food chain tells us about how organisms in an ecosystem or in a habitat dependent on each other for their nutritional resources. This food chain tells us about that how energy in the form of food is being transferred from one organism to another organism. In a food chain, organisms are representing the trophic levels. A food chain always starts with the producers and it continues with consumers. In a food chain, different trophic levels, trophic level mean feeding levels, they are represented by organisms, and the nutritional links between organisms, they are represented by arrows. Arrowhead represents an organism. Arrowhead illustrates an organism that is feeding on, and arrow tail reflects an organism that is being fed. This food chain also tells us that how energy flows through the ecosystem among the members of a community. And this food chain also illustrates that at each trophic level, the energy flow may be reducing, and it's generally reducing. This food chain also tells us that energy flow among the trophic levels in a food chain is reducing gradually at each nutritional link. The components of a food chain comprise of producer that start the food chain, then primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and the quaternary consumer. Mostly food chains have got 3 to 4 trophic levels, but there are some food chains that have got 5 to 6 trophic levels as well. Why there are limited number of trophic levels? Because the energy flow is reducing at each nutritional link. So when energy is being transferred in the form of food as chemical energy from producers to primary consumer, from primary to secondary consumer, then secondary to tertiary consumer, and even to quaternary consumers. At each nutritional link, hardly 10% of the energy is transferred and rest is lost to the environment, or you can say it escapes to the environment. So this makes less energy available for the next trophic level. So that's why we have got less number of trophic levels in the food chain. Here in the examples, the first example you can see that deer is feeding on the plant and the lion is feeding on the deer. So you can see the arrow. So arrow tail towards plant and arrowhead is towards deer. So it means deer is feeding on the plant. And similarly, the other arrowhead is reflecting lion is feeding on the deer. In the second example, you can see that butterflies are feeding on the nectar of the flower. Frogs are feeding on the butterflies. Snakes are feeding on the frogs, and eagle is feeding on the snakes. In the third example, you can see that underwater plants or the flowers are being fed by the small fish. Small fish is being fed, being predated by the large fish, and large fish is being predated by the birds of prey, by the birds. So here in these three examples, you can see that energy transfer is unidirectional. And in these examples, you can also see that for one organism, there is only one nutritional link. If due to some reason this nutritional link is disrupted, the whole of the food chain may be disrupted. These food chains are further illustrated, further explained with the help of pyramids. Let's discuss about pyramids. Just like food chain, these pyramids also tell us about the interaction of organisms on their feeding level with each other. Why we call them pyramids? Why we call these diagrams as pyramids? Because these are broader at the base, and as we keep moving up, so these pyramids are getting narrowed down, just like the pyramids you can see in where. Okay, so these diagrams that illustrate a food chain, that illustrate the relationship between organisms present at different feeding levels in a food chain. So that is also reflecting that it starts wider at the base and it gets narrow at the top. So it reflects the shape of the pyramid. There are three types of pyramids that can be evaluated from the food chains: pyramid of biomass, pyramid of number, and pyramid of energy. Pyramid of biomass tells us about the total mass of the living organisms contained at each trophic level. The maximum biomass is found at the producers level that are present at the base of the pyramid, then primary consumer, then secondary consumer, and then tertiary consumer. At each trophic level, as we move up, what we observe that biomass is reducing. This is because the transferable amount of energy in the form of chemical compounds, in the form of mass, is reducing. So plants are containing the maximum biomass because they are the producers. So that's why when we make a pyramid of biomass, so base is always broader, and when we move up from producers to primary consumers, secondary consumer, tertiary consumers, so on. So it gets narrowed down until we reach the end of the food chain in the form of food pyramid. And this is well illustrated in the diagram. You can see that mass is decreasing as we are moving up. When we talk about pyramid of energy, so you can see producers, as they do possess the maximum biomass, so they do possess the maximum energy, because energy is stored in the living organisms in the form of chemical compounds, in the form of substances they hold inside. So producers have to derive the whole food chain. So they do possess the maximum mass and maximum energy. But you can see that as we move along the food chain, or we rise up the food pyramid, what we observe at each trophic level, the energy contained by the organism is highly reduced. It is observed that at each nutritional link, when energy transfer is going on, hardly 10% of the energy is transferred from one trophic level to another trophic level, and rest of the energy is released into the surrounding, either in the form of heat, either in the form of unused chemical compounds, either in the form of wastes into the surrounding. So that is not made available for the upcoming trophic level. So that's why when we move along in a food pyramid, so transferable amount of energy is reducing. Hardly 10% of it is being transferred to the each trophic level next. So ultimately, while reaching to the end consumer, transferable amount of energy is very low. So that's why, in order to ensure that life continues an ecosystem, and within the ecosystem, within the habitat, food chains must persist. So in that case, organisms they are reducing in their population sizes in order to ensure energy they obtain, they are ensuring their survival. Here you can see in this example 10,100,000 joules of energy is being transferred to the environment from the sunlight, but out of it hardly 10,000 joule energy is maintained or retained by the plants. And when these plants are fed by the as the example shows you, snails, so they hardly get 10% of it, and that is hardly 1,000 joule. When these snails are fed by frogs, so they hardly get 10% of the energy contained by snails, so they hardly get 100 joules of energy. And the fox that may likely be feeding on the frogs, you can see it is hardly getting 10 joule of energy. Now there is a question, does that fox, does that predatory animal need only 10 joule of energy to survive? No, it needs more energy to survive. So it won't be relying only on one frog to survive. It might be feeding on many frogs to survive, to meet its daily energy demand. So that's why means transferable amount of energy is low. So that's why we do not have any other consumer after that. When we talk about pyramid of numbers, so that reflects the population size of organisms found at each trophic level. And this pyramid of number at times may be looking different from the pyramid of biomass and from the pyramid of energy. Pyramid of biomass and pyramid of energy, they are always, if they are drawn for the same food chain, so they always reflect the same. But pyramid of number may change because it tells us the population size or the count of organisms in that food chain or in that ecosystem. Okay. Here you can see in this example the clover, that are the producers, they are broader in the base, means there are more of these plants available than the snails feeding on them, they are less in count. Thrush, that is the predatory bird that feeds on snail, its count is lesser than the snails. And then we have got sparrowhawk, that is very less in number. Why? Population size reduces along the food chain in a way. Why? Because more number of organisms should be available for the next trophic level to survive, because it might be needing more energy. So that's why as energy flows, it tells us that energy is reducing at each trophic level next. So that's why population size in the next trophic level reduces in order to ensure the future survival. And this example tells you that how you can see a single oak tree is being fed by various large number of caterpillar larvae, and they are being fed by predatory birds. And you can see a single oak tree has been represented by a narrow base. Then there is a large number reflected by the caterpillars, and then the small count is reflected for that predatory bird. As we see in the food chains, for each trophic level, for each organism, there is only one nutritional source. If due to any reason that nutritional source becomes unavailable, so whole of the food chain gets disrupted. And this has been addressed very well by food web, because in one community there is not a single chain existing, multiple different food chains exist, and these food chains are not independent of each other. These food chains are interlinked with each other, and collectively all these interlinked food chains, they form a food web. You can say a food web shows interconnected network of large number of food chains that exist within a community, within an ecosystem. So number of food chains are interacting, and organisms that are a component of one food chain, they can also be found in the other food chain at a bit different trophic levels. A food chain tells us about the survival value of an organism. An organism with more than one nutritional links or feeding resources, or with less number of predators around, has more survival value when we compare it with another organism with less nutritional links or with more number of predators. A food chain tells us that if one nutritional link is somehow not available, so organisms are still able to survive relying on other nutritional links. That was not possible in case of food chain. So food web is ensuring the survival value by providing number of nutritional links to an organism. But for that, organism must be present at different trophic levels in different food chains, and all these food chains are interconnected in that food web. Just like food chain, a food web also starts with the producer, and in this diagram you can see that number of producers are available and number of primary consumers, they are relying on these producers. Like you can see, the butterfly can be finding its nectar from the lavender and the flowers, so means being primary consumer, still it has got two nutritional links. But at the same time, it also has got two predators that are feeding on the butterfly. But when we compare it with grasshopper or with the fly, so they have got one nutritional link and they have got one predator around. When we compare butterfly with the fly or with the grasshopper, so a butterfly has got two nutritional links and two predators, but the fly has got one nutritional links but many predators, and the same is the case with the grasshopper. It has got one nutritional link but two predators around. So in this case you can say that butterfly has got more survival value when compared with the fly or when compared with the grasshopper, because the butterfly has got two nutritional links, two feeding resources and two predators. But in case of fly, there are more predators than the feeding resources. So that's why fly has got a bit less survival value when it is compared with the butterfly. The most survival value in this food web you can find, that is the eagle, that is present at the end of the different food chains. It has got no predator around, but it has got many of the feeding resources. That this eagle can feed on snake, can feed on fox, can feed on frog, can also feed on the birds. So there are more feeding resources available for this eagle when we compare it with any other organism in this food web. So it means eagle is managing its daily energy demand by feeding on different organisms. But if any of the organism is missing, so eagle is still able to manage its survival by collecting all its desired energies by feeding more on the other animals or on the other organisms. This was all about the first segment of this unit, that is interaction of organisms with each other and with their environment. And stay tuned for another segment as well, where we will be discussing about nutrient cycles. So thank you very much for today.